Music notation can seem intimidating at first, but once you understand a few basics, it becomes an incredibly helpful system, and it opens up a whole new world of musical possibilities. So here's how it works. A set of 5 horizontal lines is called a staff. Notes can be placed on the lines or in the spaces between them. The range of our staff can be extended with the help of ledger lines. A higher position on the staff represents a higher pitch. So if we want to write a scale going up, we simply add a sequence of notes from left to right, each one higher than the last. For piano notation, we don't use one staff but 2, a so-called grand staff. The upper staff contains the notes for the right hand and the lower staff for the left hand. To indicate that they represent different regions of the keyboard, we use musical clefs, the treble clef and the bass clef. These symbols tell us how to interpret the note positions in each staff. This means that even though 2 notes might look the same, they represent different notes on the keyboard, depending on the clef. This might be a little confusing at first, but there's a simple way to connect the 2 clefs. They meet at middle C. In the bass clef, middle C is placed on the first ledger line above the staff. In the treble clef, middle C is on the first line below the staff. So we can use middle C as a point of orientation to figure out any note in our system. The next important thing to understand is that this system of music notation directly corresponds to the layout of the piano keyboard. Without any sharps or flats, the notes in each staff correspond to the white keys on the piano. So if we write a scale beginning on C using every possible placement in our staff, between the lines, on the line, between the lines, and so on, that's a C major scale. Of course, it works the same way in the bass clef. Now, in order to use the black keys, we can place a sharp or flat symbol in front of a note. Let's write a D major scale. Since we know that this is middle C, going up one step in our notation system takes us to the next white key. Going up another step takes us to E, followed by F. Now we simply place a sharp symbol in front of the F to turn it into F sharp. And then we have G, A, B, C sharp before we get back to D. Now, if a piece of music is in the key of D major, of course it would be kind of redundant to place sharp symbols in front of every single C and F. To simplify this, we use key signatures, a set of sharps or flats placed at the beginning of each staff, right after the clef. These key signatures tell us which notes are sharp or flat throughout the whole piece. So if a song is in D major, it will have 2 sharps in its key signature. But what if you want to use a C in this piece, despite the key signature telling us that every C should be a C sharp? For this purpose, we place a natural symbol in front of the note. This symbol tells us that we need to read this note without any sharps or flats, turning it back to a white key. Music takes place in the dimension of time, so we need to be able to define not only the pitch, but also the duration of each note. For this purpose, we use different note symbols that indicate their length. This is a whole note. It can be split into 2 half notes, 4 quarter notes, 8 eighth notes, 16 sixteenth notes, and so on. Now, this system tells us the length of each note in relation to the other notes, but it doesn't actually give us an actual time for any of them. The reason is that their duration depends on the speed, the so-called tempo of a piece of music. Sometimes sheet music will include a precise tempo, such as quarter note equals 60 beats per minute. So in this case, each quarter note would be 1 second long. In a different piece, quarter notes might be defined as 120 beats per minute, so you would need to play them twice as fast. In classical music, tempo is usually indicated by Italian terms, such as adagio, moderato, or allegro, which tells you more about how the piece should feel instead of a precise number of beats per minute. Now, in music notation, it's not only the individual note that has a certain length. Every piece of music is divided into bars, separated by bar lines. These bars, or measures, are equal segments of time that help us understand the rhythmic structure of a piece of music. Let's take a typical waltz rhythm as an example. It's very easy to hear that there's a repeating pattern of 3 beats. So it makes a lot of sense to organize this piece of music into bars of that length. At the beginning of every piece, there's a time signature, which tells you about its rhythmic structure. The top number gives us the number of beats in each bar, and the bottom number tells us which note length corresponds to 1 beat. So in this case, the time signature informs us that each bar has a length of 3 quarter notes. The most common time signature, which is used for the vast majority of popular music, is 4/4, meaning each bar has 4 beats and each beat is a quarter note. In fact, 4/4 is so common that it is often replaced by the C symbol, which stands for common time. Now, although music is generally perceived to be more about emotions than numbers, the length of each bar is strictly defined. If our time signature tells us that there are 4 quarters in each bar, that has to be fulfilled. The only exception is that at the very beginning of a piece, there can be an incomplete bar, such as a single note before the first bar line. But after that, each bar has to contain the exact amount of beats that are indicated in the time signature. Nothing more, nothing less. So, in the 4/4 time signature, we could fill a bar with 4 quarters, or 2 half notes, or 2 quarters and a half note, or 1 whole note. However, in a 3/4 time signature, there can never be a whole note in a bar, because it's too long. On the other hand, if we put only a half note in a bar, it's incomplete. There's a quarter note missing. Of course, sometimes we want a break within a melody, or a moment of silence between chords. That's why each note has a corresponding rest, which indicates silence for that same duration. So, in our example, instead of adding a quarter note after our half note, we could also add a quarter rest to complete the bar. So, let's put this into practice and play a short segment together.